Welcome, Jenna Levine Liu. Thank you so much for joining us today. Jenna's kind of an interesting story. She came from a background of marketing, and you talked about how you had done media and advertising previously, and she used it to start her own company, which is a community of moms. It's 45 chapters in 13 states, groups of moms that come together to kind of support one another. We talk about all kinds of things, and I am in her DC group, and it's kind of amazing to see all of these moms from such diverse groups and diverse backgrounds coming together and having a community and a connection. And one of the reasons why I want to have Jenna on here was that she is very open about mental health, about family trauma, about all the things that people love to gloss over, but that are what really connect us. And I love how real you are and how open you are. And what it does is it creates an environment and a community where everybody can be open about their crap. And some people do so anonymously, but a lot of people do it openly and genuinely. And they just put their information out there and they say, here's what I'm struggling with, or here's what's going really, really well. Mm-hmm. And so what I keep hearing from people is that they want to have more of that connectiveness. And I'm curious from your perspective, having grown all of these communities, what in your background gave you the insight of how to develop these, and how have your own challenges given you a springboard to kind of catapult yourself into this level of success? Because at this point in time, you've got hundreds of thousands of people that you're talking to regularly in these groups, and it's an amazing experience.
Oh, well, that'd be good. I'm so glad you're in it and that you feel that way. So it's much like anything, kind of a culmination of several different things that came together at the perfect time. So like you said, I have a background in advertising and media. I've been doing it since I was 25. So my first media job, I worked with the Washington City paper, and then I jumped over to TV. And where I've spent the last sort of part of my career before doing this was political advertising. So I've been in advertising in some capacity for now about 15 years. I have always loved social media. I was never trying to be an influencer or do anything with the platform. I just loved sharing my life and seeing what other people were doing. And I was an early adopter of most of those platforms, right? As soon as Facebook was available at my school, I went to American University, which is crazy for me to think about, that I was in a time where we were waiting for Facebook to come to our school. Like, it's just bananas to me to think back that far, right? And it's not even that far. It's crazy how quickly things have grown and changed. But when I was first found out I was pregnant with my daughter, Poppy, it was July of 2019. So I was only 6 months pregnant. She was born in September. But I realized at the time, all of my close friends lived in Northern Virginia, which is fine when you're single. You pop over for brunch, you go into DC for happy hour. There's really no time constraints. Who cares? You go on the metro, you come home a little tipsy, whatever. But when you have a kid, it's a whole different story, like getting your kid in the car and driving 45 minutes, and I'm trying to do nap times and all this stuff. So I knew that I needed a support network of friends that were mom friends that lived where I lived in Montgomery County. So I like to say I do what any like basic suburban person does, and I joined a bunch of moms Facebook groups. And when I went in there, I kind of went into full panic mode. And I don't have anything negative to say about these groups because they're really great resources. But a lot of them are listicles, which is just like recommendation. There's not really like a guiding force behind it. And there's a lot of negativity that is very hard to control, right? And the moderators, they're volunteers, they have full-time jobs, they're doing other stuff. They're like not in the comments every day, like looking for fights. They only get notified once something's already sort of been tipped off. So I started to freak out. I was like, oh my God, so can I have a baby? And then what, I become a mommy, or all I care about is like organic baby food, and then like judging other people for how they parent their kids. And it just wasn't my vibe. And I knew that there had to be more people out there where they wanted to be who they were before they had a kid. And granted, life changes and you change and your personality changes, but I was Jenna Levine Liu before my daughter Poppy was born. I'm going to be her when she leaves the house and goes off on her own. I needed to maintain some version of who I was as a person, and not just Poppy's mom, or by the time that she does leave for college, if that's what she chooses, I wouldn't be left with this empty hole where a life should have been built, right?
Yeah.
So I started my own group, no intention of turning it into a business. I really just wanted that something that was more in person for me to make mom friends on a consistent basis. So I started it, I was 6 months pregnant, which is comical because I had no idea what it would be like to actually have a kid. And looking back, like, cute. You don't know what it's like until you actually have a kid and then you have this baby and you're like, oh my God, like, where's the instruction manual? I have no idea what I'm doing and this is a nightmare. But nobody really talks about that either. They make motherhood out to be this like beautiful thing, and in some ways it is, but it's also a nightmare. And I call it a beautiful nightmare because I love my daughter so much, but I did not realize how much of my mental health and my body and my time and my sanity and all these other things were going to be sort of pulled away once she arrived here, because we don't talk about that because that's the negative. Our children are miracles and
Yes.
the negative, and that's changed like a little bit now. Like I am hearing more people talk about it, not because of my group, but in general, like we're all out here, like we're working full-time jobs, we're being full-time parents. We're living in a world that the cost of living has gone up astronomically compared to what people are making, and we're struggling and we're drowning, and people are finally at the tipping point where they're like, I'm freaking out. Like I need to talk about it. So once I had my daughter, I started to share more openly about parenting in a very comical way. I've always been a good writer. I went to a special high school for creative writing. I love writing. I can tell a really good story. And when you can tell a story, as you know, people gravitate towards that because they can relate, they feel seen. You're telling them something that they feel, but they don't know how to put it into their own words. So we started growing kind of quickly. People were inviting their friends. They were talking about us like there's this funny new sort of moms group. I put in a lot of content about hot guys, like sex jokes, like memes, stories, more of a influencer sort of led group than just a resource listicle. And so people started to ask about advertising, and I have this background in advertising. So I did it for free for a while because I didn't want to have a conflict of interest. Not that I really thought that there would be, but I just didn't see the need to do that. But writing content and copy gets time consuming, right? Because there's a thought process that goes into it. So I charged a little bit and people paid, and I charged a little bit more and they still paid. And then I had this light bulb moment where I thought, well, one group is one thing, but if I had a whole network of these groups, that's national advertising dollars, and I can take this concept, help people, and then also earn revenue at the same time. So it was, the pandemic was terrible. It was such a traumatic time for so many people, but for me, it wound up being a little bit of a silver lining because now all these moms were home and they were freaking out, right? There was no outlet. They had no break from their children. They were working full-time jobs remotely and also doing virtual learning with kindergartners or first graders.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was it was a really hard time. So we grew exponentially because we provided this outlet where people were talking pretty honestly about their struggles, but also finding a place where it was funny. They could laugh. We did like online talent shows. We did, Zoom happy hours. We sort of provided this space for people to connect in a world that was incredibly disconnected. And the internet was I couldn't imagine the pandemic in like 1985, what that would have been like.
Wow. Yeah. It would have been so lonely. I mean, it was so lonely, but like even more so.
And how would you get any information?
Yeah.
The news, I guess. You
Yeah.
have to turn on your news to figure out what the new rules and regulations were. So we grew very fast, and I left my full-time job. I was doing political, so I worked through the November 2020 election, and then went and did this full-time because I was working like 100 hours a week, and I had a 6-month-old at home, and I was just like, I can't do this. So I said to my husband, I was like, I think I can really do something with this. I'd like to go all in. And he said, replace your salary in 1 year or find a new job. And he definitely didn't do that. And I still haven't done that, but we've grown to a really nice place, and we're continuing to grow and getting a little bit better in how we do things and operate. So it's been 4 years come March. will be our 4-year anniversary. And so, like you said, we have 45 chapters in 13 states. I operate on a licensing model, which we started last year. So people who run those groups actually license the Sixx Cool Moms name from me. So I don't run those individual groups. I run the Montgomery County group still, like that's my baby, and it's my home, it's my community. It's also a tester group. So we try things in there to see if it works. And then if it works, we'll push it out to other communities and stuff like that. And it also provides me just a lot of satisfaction. Like it's my home, right? I love the women in that group. Like I feel very connected to my community. So I'll probably continue to run it for the foreseeable future. But all the other groups are run by people that I call market directors, who act as a local influencer in their community. So they pretty much are the me in their market, but with their own personalities, their own spin on things. So I kind of give the direction, but they're their own people. You can't be me and I can't be them.
Yeah.
So the groups kind of gravitate to whoever is leading it at the time. And they license it. It's their small business. They get the majority of the advertising that they sell, and then we get to sell national advertising in those groups, and then we get to keep it. So it's profitable for me, profitable for them. But we're also, because it's a business, we run our groups like a business. So there's a certain amount of content that we try to keep up in the groups to compensate for the advertising. So it's not all advertising, but they're actually getting value out of it in entertainment, and we plan events and we do all these things, and we heavily moderate the group. So there is no drama. There is no aggressiveness. We don't allow for it. We remove people. We're constantly in the back end making sure that these groups run efficiently, because for us, they're a business. And I think that's a little bit what makes us different than other traditional groups that are out there, is that because this is a business to us, we're going to treat it like one, and we're going to run these groups like they're a business. We're going to provide you an amazing service, but we're also not going to let you go in there and scream at each other and fight, because that's the mindset of the moms groups, right? Like when people joke about them, because they can be really brutal.
They can, and it's, I mean, that's the internet in general. You know, that was one of the things that I was not prepared for when my first post went viral. Was, you know, it was like, oh wow, look at all these people that are starting to follow me. That's awesome. And then this huge tidal wave of vitriol and, you know, just attacking. And I'm like, you know, it's a simple video of me hiking with my kids, but like, you know, people were saying horrible things.
Insulting how you look, how you treat your kids, all of this stuff. And you're like, yeah, the internet. I honestly don't. So I'll tell you this. So because I have been doing this now for 4 years, and you've been doing it significantly longer, so you know, I started to think about, and the group setting's a little bit different because now you're dealing with a lot of different personalities, so things can get huge so quickly, right? Like on my personal page, I don't really get very many people that are saying anything negative about me, because they're following me because they like me. And if they do say something negative, I can block it and delete it. But it's harder in the groups. But I like to say that everybody's sort of walking around with this like cloud over their head, or a pair of sunglasses. And everything that they listen to or view or hear gets filtered through this cloud or these glasses based on every personal experience, every trauma that person has had in their life. And so I could say something that I find funny and you find funny, but person C has an experience in their past where they don't find it funny and they find that really traumatic. And instead of reflecting and thinking, oh, like I'm triggered because this is what happened, they lash out and they feel personally attacked. And we don't know who they are, right? So there's not really a way to account for that. So once I started to realize those were the things that were happening, it was easier to take a lot less stuff personally. And so I guess for you having this viral video of you hiking with your kids, they're seeing it and they're like, screw her and her happy family and her cute kids and her great life, and I'm miserable and I just lost my job. And they're just going to take that out on you with no realization that it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with something that's happening way over here. But you're a real easy target because you're an anonymous person on the internet. And once you put this together, it becomes like, so I will say this, and I'm sure you still do too. Sometimes somebody will say something and I'm like, oh my God,
I mean,
that is mean.
hurts. Here I am, I'm a mature woman. I came from a child of trauma. And so I always used to say, I'm like, there's nothing you can say to me that my parents haven't already done. Like I thought I had a thick skin. And then, but it is one of those things where like every time, and it's weird because every time I have a video go viral, I get that influx of hate. And it's, the first question is, okay, who's the asshole here? Is it this person or is it me? Like, I need to stop. And I always stop and do like the introspection of like, am I missing something? Am I, am I what this person and this, like, are these things valid? And, and then I'm like, I mean, I will say it is incredibly validating when I go and look at the profiles of these people because, and I love, depending on how petty I'm feeling in a given moment, I love because Facebook will let me do a screenshot and send it to them and be like, is this you? Wait, this is you. You're the one that's attacking me, but this, I just want to make certain that we're both seeing the same source because I really, you're going to come after me, but you might want to like rectify your own issues before you attack me for mine.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. And I also get a lot of disrespect is what I'd call it, because I took something that was traditionally free, right? This mom's Facebook groups have been around forever. I didn't invent that idea, but I took it to a level that nobody's really ever done before and made it profitable and made the experience better. But because that's the world in which I started, I get a lot of hate, mostly from other women, which is kind of unfortunate. That's like a how dare she kind of mentality. Like, you should be doing it for free. And just because something's been done for free for so long doesn't mean that it should be forever. And it's work. Like, we're working hard to make the groups run well. Why do you care if we're earning revenue off of it? But it's like that disrespect, like, oh, she has a bunch of moms groups. And I was like, no, I have a national brand that I'm killing myself to build. That's cool if you don't like it. You don't have to be a part of it. But that level of disrespect was like a little bit shocking to me, because when and I hate to say this too, like when I tell other dad business owners or male business owners what it is they do, they're always like, wow, that's really brilliant. And for the women in business, it's the same. But your average mom who's just like on a Facebook group finds it to be upsetting to them. And I still can't figure out what it is about earning revenue, making money for your work is so offensive to people. I don't get it, because my brain doesn't work that way.
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing, and I don't know if that is women in success in general, or the biggest thing that I found, I was very successful in my corporate career. I've started a couple of businesses that have been successful. I find that people hate to see, and I don't know if it's just women, so this may be men experience this as well.
And I'll say this, I hate to say it because I'm such a feminist and I'm such a rah like sisterhood. But it just doesn't feel like that's the message that everybody is putting out there. I just want to caveat that. I love women, love them.
I feel like it's hard though sometimes for people to see women being successful, especially on their own terms. And you look at any woman that I've ever known that's been successful, they're often lonely. You have to be willing to do something that's outside of the norm, that's outside the comfort zone. You have to be willing to just say, you know what? No, I've gotten some not great feedback over the idea that I have a podcast and my social media. Like, people are like, well, you should just stick with being a mom. Go mom. And it's, and it is interesting.
No.
I mean, but the thing is, the old saying, I've rewritten that old saying of, the old saying, those that can do, those that can't teach. And I absolutely disagree with that. I say those that can do, those that can't criticize. And it comes from a place of jealousy. It's not so much you have the audacity. It's, oh man, why don't I have the courage to do that? There must be something wrong with her, because what she's doing sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
But but it wouldn't work for me. So it's not fair that it works for her, because it is scary, you know?
So I'll say this too, like again, I've never done this before, right? So I literally had this idea and I was like, let's throw spaghetti at the wall and see what works and let's pivot. I didn't realize the effects on my personal life because I actually lost the people that I thought we would be best friends forever. I lost all of them. One of them actually sent me an email. I didn't know anything was wrong at 5 p.m. on a Friday, breaking up with me. And the summation of her email was she couldn't handle my online personality. And I said, but I was like taken aback, but my online personality is the same as I am in person. But what I realized what had happened is that she had postpartum depression and all her own issues. And so she's looking at me succeeding and being happy and all of these things and could not handle it.
Yeah.
And instead of just unfollowing me
Yeah.
and continuing with the relationship, she wanted to make sure I knew how offensive she broke up with me. My best friend broke up with me because of my job, and I'm still mourning that loss because I was so taken aback that I did not realize when I did this I would lose people like that. But when you start to be successful, people they fall away.
I saw a brilliant quote, and I wish I could remember who it was. It was on a meme the other day, and it was a woman executive, and she said, you know, the thing about your social media and your business selves is that they're not made for anyone in your personal life. And in fact, if they follow you, something I had to make peace with a long time ago was when I launched a business. You always think that your friends and your family are going to be the ones that support you, and they are not.
Nope.
And people get so discouraged when they start a business, and you know, this quote unquote support network that they expect to be what comes up and helps them rise isn't. And it comes down to like, what is inside of you? What burning determination to be like, you know what, I'm going to succeed anyway. And that is what it ends up being a lot of times. Is it's just pure raw determination to see it through when everyone around you is saying, you're not good at this. This isn't right for you. You should sit back and stick with the safe stuff.
Yeah. How dare you?
How dare you?
How dare you? Yeah. That's kind of.
And it is. And I would imagine that men experience, I don't know that it's a female only thing. I mean, I don't know. I haven't discussed this with men, but I do know that I too lost two of my when I had my accident, I lost the ability to maintain a facade any longer. And up until then, I had maintained this very, I never talked about my family abuse. I never talked about any of the challenges I had in life. I was very determined and optimistic, and I worked really, really hard. And, you know, I had carried a lot of shame over my background, and I would not talk about it because when you are raised being told, you know, it's because you're bad that you get hit. And if you tell anybody about this, you're going to get your dad in a lot of trouble. And he only does it because you deserve it. And so when you are raised with that narrative, it becomes, I carried a lot of shame. And then when I had my accident, I lost the ability to maintain that facade any longer. And I became very real about everything. And my two closest friends, who, like you said, I thought we would be friends forever. And they both stepped away. And we're open about stepping away. And we're like, you know what, we can't support you through this. Like, good luck with that. And you know, it is interesting how I think that people, you know, relationships are fluid. I think we as a society want them to be written in stone. And the reality is that people will gravitate towards a version of you that fits into whatever rubric they have a need for. And when you growing takes you outside of that rubric. And that's the beauty of growth, but it's also the pain of growth, which is you no longer fit into this cage, you no longer fit into this box. And so this new version of you that you are moving towards, which is like so much more healthy and more real of a version of you, no longer fits into the need of these people.
Yeah.
And you have to be at a place where you are comfortable enough in your own skin and in this growth and believe enough in it to say, you know what, that's okay. Those relationships fit me when I was a smaller version of myself. And that's okay.
And the truth is, at the end of the day, who I was before, I was forcing myself into a box I did not fit into. I did not belong in corporate America. I just never did. I just am not like, I was forcing myself to fit into these spaces. And I'm not going to go back to a corporate job to keep friends, you know what I mean? So it kind of allowed me to see it for what it was. And now I can be who I am, and I can be wild in my own ways and have people appreciate that for what it is. And it's allowed me to make friends now that really appreciate me and support me. And I'm so grateful for that. But the friends that I do have that I knew before, as you were saying, they don't come to any of my events. They don't participate in my group. They don't want to be a part of that. And I don't mind it, because I don't need everybody to be a sycophant and be like, Jenna's amazing, this group is amazing, blah, blah, blah. I don't need that. But I also don't feel like those people, the ones that are still there, are judging me for it either. They're like, this is Jenna, this is what she does, but she's our friend, and so we want to be her friend on this level. So I also understand that aspect of it. Like, they don't take it personally, but they don't really want to mess around on Facebook, and they don't really want to go to events and meet people, and that's okay too. There's a balance to all of that. But it was still like a hard learning lesson to be like, oh, I did think everybody was going to support me, but they really didn't. And people would ask, and I'm sure they did with you too, which is like, oh, how's your like little company going? How's it going? How's your little Instagram page? You're like, oh, it's so condescending. But I think also business owners don't think that way. So when I hear somebody with a good idea, I'm like, that's awesome. Good for you. I love this. Because I'm not threatened by anybody else's success. I want to see people succeed, and I love a good idea. I love women in business, but I sometimes forget that not everybody thinks that way. And so I can't expect them to. So I really try not to take things personally. And it's taken about 4 years of being, you curse, so I'm going to do like being shit on for me to be like, so I also tell my team that too. People will be nasty to you.
Yes.
They're going to tell you you suck. They're going to be mad that you make money. They're going to tell you your group is awful. You're awful. You're ugly. Your makeup's terrible. You're a terrible parent. How dare you? Yep. And the only thing I can say is don't take it personally, but you're going to take it personally until it happens enough where you become numb to it and you can see it coming a mile away, and you know that it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with that person. And that for every one quote unquote hater, I hate that word, but hater, for every one hater, you have 10 people who are in your corner, who love what you do, who benefit from what you're sharing with them. And as easy as it is to get yourself sucked into that one negative thought, to try to focus on the 10 other people who told you how much they loved you in the past month. And it's a slow sort of learning process, and it takes time, but you kind of get there. But I also really try, and this is like my new thing this year. I'm like you, I'm like on my healing journey where I'm like dealing with all my shit and all my childhood trauma and all this stuff to try to like be a better version. Yeah. When you do that, you can't hide from yourself and your own sort of toxic traits. But what I'm really trying to do is to not focus on anybody else, not the good, not the bad, just look ahead and be like, this is what I have to do. What I'm doing is not for me. Sixx Cool Moms is not Jenna Levine Liu. It is its own company. I need to separate myself from it, because if it becomes all about me, it will never succeed, because there's only so far that I personally am going to be able to take that. And if I make it about me, then my team can't succeed, because it's all going to be under my shadow, which is why I'm not on the website. I'm out there in interviews. I do stuff. I'm still the head of the company. But those groups, I'm not in those groups. I'm not running the show in those groups. Those are their groups, their small businesses. And if me and my brand can help them succeed, that feels good enough. I don't need people to tell me how great I am. I want to watch other people succeed because of an idea that I had, and that's really where I get the most satisfaction from. And really, I'm trying to change the narrative about motherhood. We need to be elevated to the 21st century, because even in this conversation, we're not there yet. We're treated so poorly. We're supposed to work full-time jobs, be full-time caretakers, look 25 forever, have an amazing house, be these sort of Instagram versions of reality. And that's becoming overwhelming, and people are burning out and crashing, and it is preventing them from being happy. It's preventing them from being fulfilled in motherhood. And so being this person that can sort of go there and say, well, that's really silly. Like, let's change that. Let's go back to who we were at 25 and laugh at a penis meme. Because you know what? It's still funny. Just because you have a kid doesn't mean penises are less funny. They're funny.
They are. I love a good cock.
Yeah, right?
I have a running joke that I do on my pages where anytime I'm out antiquing and I see a huge rooster,
Yeah.
magnificent white cock. And then I've seen multicolored ones. I love.
I've never seen a red one before.
I've seen a red, blue, and green one, which I'm not sure what goes into that, but you know, they're beautiful. They're all magnificent.
So funny enough, we have an after dark group that we launched that is slowly becoming one of the highest engaged groups that we have. And sometimes I'm in there and I'm like, oh my God, you guys are disgusting. But I love it because they're enjoying themselves in a way that it feels like we're not allowed to enjoy ourselves or laugh. And so the more that we can do that, to say like, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom, the more people are going to start to see that just because you have a kid does not mean you have to give up the parts of yourself that you loved before. You can have a kid and still have hobbies. You can have a kid and still remain parts of your personality that you had before. Things will change, right? Because they just sort of have to. But at the end of the day, you're who you are, and you should not change unless you want to change to fit into some narrative that society puts out there for you. And I love that you're doing that, right? You're giving the honest, real version of who you are so that others feel comfortable sharing those parts about themselves. I actually have a term for that too. And I didn't create this term. Someone on the internet did, and I wish I could give them credit, but I don't exactly know who it was anymore. But I practice something, and I tell my team to practice something called elegant vulnerability, which is sharing parts of yourself that are less than perfect or you're less than proud of, but doing it from a place of strength, right? So sharing your story not from a victim point of view, but for more of a survivor. And people love that. And it's doing that versus being a hot mess online, which being a hot mess will get you likes, will get you engagement, but it's not going to build respect, and it's not going to create a trusted brand.
It doesn't feed you. I mean, with my social media, I've run the gambit. Like when I first started, I was a hot mess. I was dealing with this head injury. I was dealing with like a life that was falling apart because I had carefully constructed it, and I no longer, I couldn't walk. I had a hard time maintaining conversation. I had these overpowering headaches. I had all these surgeries, and I just wanted someplace where I could be open and honest. And it was originally purely like a personal diary for me. And I would put stuff out there. And I know my mother really, it's one of those things where it's like, she didn't want to be called for her shit. And so like, it really upset her that I would say things that were open and honest and true, but that were really uncomfortable for her to have put out in the light of day. Yeah. And, but it was so freeing for me to put it out there and to bring it out and put it in the air of day and be like, this is my truth. And what I have found is that the more I stand in my truth, the more it gives other people the license to stand in their truth. And it's an interest. I did the interview with Rob Shear, and we were talking about that. I was working with him on completely unrelated initiative during the beginning of the pandemic. And our very first conversation, he just starts like listing all of his shit. And I was like, whoa. And he was like, and I've got a book on it, you know, here's where you find it on Amazon. It'll tell you all my stuff. And so I got the book and I'm like, this takes guts. And we were talking about this during his interview. And he said, you know, my partner said to me, Rob, you've got this great gift that you can offer people, which is being open about your story, but you've got to be willing to be open about your story. And it is a ripple effect. His honesty impacted me. You know, my honesty, I get notes from people all the time saying, you know, thank you so much for being open about this, and you know, about all the components that I'm willing to put out there. And as you said, what was it you called it? Elegant truth?
Elegant vulnerability.
Elegant vulnerability. That is such a gift to give people, because it is hard, and especially when we come from such a puritanical nation as America, where we have this heavy social media forefront that, you know, you look at people and you think, okay, this is their truth, and it's not. It's a glossy, highly manicured, highly curated version.
Mm-hmm.
But that taking a moment and being open and raw is what really resonates with people. And
It 100% does.
yes.
And like I said, being a hot mess will get you engagement. Like if I went out there and I was like, my husband is such a dick and he did this, and this, and I can't stand him. And what do you guys think? People will engage, but they're going to be like, she's a nutbag, you know, in polite terms, right? They'd be like, so you kind of have to think about how you word stuff. So sharing the parts of yourself and telling your story and your truth, but not coming at it in a way that's so that's going to make people think, like, be like, I don't know what's going on over there, but she's got a lot going on.
And if you know, but there's also space for that as well. If that's
Yeah.
what one is comfortable with, there is space for people to be whatever version of their honest truth. You know, because there's a certain amount of me that is still a hot mess. You know, I will always be the woman with severe nerve damage in the back of my head. Like that is and I had, you know, I have days where I've got a heavy migraine and I am hot messier than hell. And that is the truth of my reality, is that it is, you know, it isn't always pretty, and it isn't always, and I don't put things out there that I work really hard to not put things out there coming from a victim mindset, because, you know, it is easy sometimes when you're feeling sorry for yourself to be like, oh, this sucks. I work really hard not to do that, because I know
it's hard though. It's hard.
It is.
Because technically you are a victim. Somebody hit you with their car.
Yeah, but you know, I look at it as one of my favorite sayings, that everyone has their challenges and these are mine. And the second I start looking at my situation as a victimhood thing is the second that I start letting someone else's actions control my narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And so I work really hard to be open and honest about my situation, but I also work really hard not to focus on the negative side, because whatever you focus on grows. When you focus on the negative, that's what you're going to get more of. And when you
100%
look positive, you get more of the positive. And so in leadership, one of the biggest things that I used to teach my leaders was, if you want to see more of something, you recognize the crap out of whatever you want to see more of. And same thing with negativity. You know, if you're seeing something negative, the easiest way to see more of that is to put a whole lot of attention on that and call it out and really put a lot of energy into it. Because out of nowhere, that's going to snowball. Whereas, you know,
I've been there. I have been there.
I think we all have. I think that's a very human thing to do, is like, when everybody's had those years where it's just one thing after another, and you're like, where does it end? Like really, where? But at some point in time, it will end. At some point in time, things will turn back up again, and you have to be willing to ride out that, you know, I will call it just abysmal, whatever it is. The next upswing.
And I'll say this too. I try to practice elegant vulnerability, but yeah, sometimes I act like a hot mess, and that is reality. So I try, and I don't always succeed there. And then at those instances where I'll be like, "Ooh, this isn't going the way I wanted to," I'll delete posts. Like, I don't need to leave that up there for forever.
I hate that where like you were trying so hard to be a bigger person and it just everything you touch turns to crap. And you're
I know.
what's going on here? And it's one of those where like you're like, okay, I need to step away from this for a little while and just let it breathe and let things run their course. And that to me has been a big learning lesson because I'm one that like when things are not going where I want them to, I want to like I want to just wade in and address it and get to the
Uh-huh.
of it. And sometimes that is not the way that you fix it.
And I'll also say this too. Part of it is having a job that is exclusively on social media. Social media is really addictive. And
And
so I get addicted to it just as much as a regular person. But it's my job, so it's hard for me to break away. But
yeah,
I've definitely been sucked into like negative
yeah.
cycles because I'm just in this weird social media loop. And so I can recognize myself doing that and try to pull myself away. But like anybody else, like social media is is very addictive and sometimes not a most of the time not a great way.
And
So I
I
try to manage that too.
and it is one of those things where I can't remember. I was watching some documentary on social media, and they were talking about how they intentionally program it that way. Like they program it to get the strongest emotional response out of people possible. And anger happens to be a really, really successful one. And so not only do they intentionally move you toward, you think about it, joy is great, but when you're in a moment of joy, you won't move, you don't usually move. Sadness is the same thing. Lots of times sadness will just paralyze you. Anger will get a reaction out of people. And not only that, but it'll be like, can you believe this? Hey, Jenna, you've got to go check this out because this is insane. And so
Yep.
they've found that the more they can target what your assumptions are and feed you more information that's going to convince you that you are absolutely right in these assumptions and that you should be angry about it, the more you're going to spend more time because you're going down this rabbit hole and you're like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely true. The color gray gives you cancer, and you get going down that rabbit hole and then you're sitting with your friends and
It does seem though that they've put a stop to that regarding politics. Because now if you bring up politics, they bury those posts. Like they don't want people to get involved in those conversations because it reflects poorly on the companies. So now that algorithm's like, if I see politics, if I see Republican, if I see any of these things, Democrat, we're going to bury it because we don't want that. And then everybody looks at us like we're fixing elections and things like that. So now that that's gone, it's they have to find other things for people to be angry about for them to gravitate towards. So it'll be interesting to see like what the new thing is that it's just making people angry. And now you're going to see it all the time. It's going to be super amplified.
it'll be interesting. I mean,
Okay.
I was reading an article on CNN about mental health and how the number one thing that people are depressed and anxious over is the state of our nation. And that's a scary thing to be anxious over because like,
I don't mean to laugh, but when I think about it, I like have to laugh because I'm like, wow, it's really wild right now. I said to my husband, we're on like the cusp of World War III, and he's like, people have been saying that for generations and blah blah blah. I'm like, sure, but I don't know. It feels like feels like we're on the cusp of
well,
World War III.
real scary right now. And it's, I mean, and I think people as a whole are not certain what to make of that. And it's hard.
Well, I think it's one of the first elections where the majority of voters are like, I don't like anybody and I don't know what to do. I kind of may not, I just may, it might be the lowest voter turnout in history based on people just being like, if this is all we got, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but it's like the disillusionment that's pretty bad right now. And so I don't ever really talk about like you could probably guess my political views based on just like meeting me and knowing me. But I don't like talk about them in my communities or stuff like that because then just people get like wild and they fight. And it's whatever.
I'm
But
trying to be better about that because I used to be like hyper political.
Same, same.
Like, and I'm working really hard because like I've offended people, and it's like that was never my intent to do, but I'm like, shit, okay, I've got to be. I mean, I know that religion and politics are the two big ones you should never talk about, and I'm trying my hardest to do better about not talking about them because
Oof, it's hard as a Jew out there in the world right now. I'm trying to keep my mouth shut and
it,
like not get involved.
it is. I
It's wild.
so my Oma escaped the Holocaust, and but I'm not Jewish. You know, in fact, we didn't know she was Jewish until after her death. We knew she escaped
Oh,
the Holocaust, but she was always like, we never really knew what the story was because she wouldn't talk about it. And it was one of the things where you just kind of were like, oh, you know, something happened and she ended up in the concentration camps and lost her entire family in the concentration camps. Don't really know what happened. And it wasn't until after she died that we realized she was Jewish. And I experienced my first exposure to anti-Semitism, and it was wild because I was like, this is where like I'm, you know, yes, I am of Jewish descent, but I'm not personally Jewish. And you're going after me over viewpoints that I'm just giving you a heads up that you might want to be a little bit cautious with in today's environment. Like you just might want, and like this woman went ballistic. And it was,
yeah.
this is insane.
Yeah.
And so I can't even imagine, like, you know.
Well, so when everything happened in October, my initial reaction was to like be stand up for Israel because I'm a Jew and I've been to Israel and all this stuff. And I was actually, and this is like the first, when it first happened, I was blown away by the reaction to it, which was a how dare you not stand up for what's going on in Gaza. And I'm like, but just like 1,300 people were just brutally massacred and they're my people. Why would I like, I was so confused. And so I made a couple of statements and it like, all the Jewish people were excited. All the people who were supportive of the other side were like a how dare you kind of a thing. And so I won't speak on it anymore. And if anybody tries to bring it up, I like shut it down. Like I made a post about the Grammys. Like, what was your favorite moment from the Grammys? Harmless, right? I didn't think that I was going to turn sideways. So why would you do that? And somebody was like, my favorite comment or my favorite moment was Annie Lennox standing up and saying that she was for the ceasefire. And then somebody commented, but I didn't hear her say anything about the hostages. And then it started to like pile on. So I had to delete the comment. And then I got in trouble for deleting the comment because how dare I delete the comment? I was like, this is just not the space to have this conversation. And I find it personally really upsetting. So we're not going to have it here. Go to your personal page and fight about it. Like, I'm not going to engage you in that conversation at all because you don't want to hear what I have to say. I don't want to hear what you have to say. And so we're not going to talk about it. And some people don't like that and they leave the group or whatever it is because I'm not agreeing with their point of view. And so I have found being in this world, being a Jewish person on social media, especially running a company like this, I have found it very difficult to swallow how I feel for the sake of not causing conflict and blowing up my own company. But it is a huge challenge for me. And people don't see it that way, right? Because they only see their sort of point of view about things. But that Grammy one, I was like, really? It's the Gram? Like, come on. You gotta
But when people want to take something and run with it, it does not matter what you say. They find a loophole to run with.
Yeah. I will say, because I do have some strong beliefs and my, this is my brand. And so my brand in some ways does represent who I am. And so I made a decision that as a company, right, like our stance is that we are pro-choice, we're for women's right to choose, and we're pro-vaccine. You don't have to believe those things to be in our groups, but you are never going to have a platform to talk about anything else because this is what we believe in. And I have made that clear. And some people don't like that, and that's okay, but I don't know if we're for them then, because what we're trying to do here does not bode well for those those belief systems. So you can be a part of it if you want to, and I'm not going to judge you for how you feel, but you're not going to talk about it in any one of our communities because that's not who we are and what we stand for. And I haven't found it affect me in any real way. And that partially might be because so many of our groups are like in these on like the East Coast or West Coast. And I have a group in Alabama and they're probably totally different, but we just don't talk about it. That's our baseline messaging, but we're not going to talk about it other than that. And if they don't like it, like they don't like it. But we also want to be a space for those women who believe that in those areas because they do exist, to have a safe space for them in a community where they feel like I cannot speak about my truth because I'm so afraid of what my neighbors might think.
And it does come back to that whole discussion we were having earlier of you have to be confident enough in your own skin to be unpopular and pick the things that you believe in enough to stand up for and be willing to stand up for them. And it's, it will lose some connections, but it'll also free up space for the right ones to come in and to fill in that emptiness. And so it's an iterative process. It's not straightforward, but the more you stand in your truth, the more people will be attracted to that, and the right people it will resonate with.
100%, which is all I always tell people, if you try to appeal to everyone, you will ultimately appeal to no one. So you have to kind of pick what your truth is, what feels good for you, and those people will gravitate towards you. And unless your viewpoint is like so out of scale, like if I was so one way or the other, yeah, it would be really hard for me to grow, right? Because now I'm only growing with a very specific sect of people. But I do have the couple of things that are important to me. And again, we don't blast it out. I'm not in every group, like, just so you know. But as a company standpoint, if I see that post, we're deleting that post. If you see that comment, we're going to delete that comment. We're going to tell you why we're doing it. And if you choose to leave because of that, that is a choice that you can make, and that's fine. I don't take it personally, but I feel so strongly about women's health that like I have to stick to that. If I don't, I will lose the part of myself that matters most to me. And that's that part that really cares about people's individual freedoms.
And that's huge though. You know, it's good for people to have a place where they can come and be open and honest. And as you said, if it is something they're highly, highly opposed to, chances are there are other ways that they're going to be opposed to these messages in general. And it's not the right space for them. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Like you can't, not every space is meant for everybody. And I think that sometimes we forget that as individuals because we think that everything should be for us. And it's just it's not the case. Like there's plenty of groups out there for every different, very specific
niche. And
like there's Democratic moms groups, there's Republican mom groups, there's probably moms for Biden, moms for Trump, mom for guns, moms against guns. Like there's a million of those out there. Go find your niche if you feel super strong. But where we are, we're not going to talk about politics, and we have the two things that we care about. And if you talk about those, we're just going to remove it. But hopefully you don't do that because it comes up so rarely, which is beautiful. When you start to set the message early on, people follow. They know what they can get away with and they know what they can't. And new people who come in, if they try it, it's kind of like you have to set the precedent once again. And once you do, it's just like people there's like an art form to running communities. And I did not realize I'd be good at it, right? Because I didn't go to school for it, right? I just happened to be like a natural thing that I was good at being a leader of a community. I was 8 weeks old. I slept taking her out of the bath, and my mom instinct was like to protect her. So I took the full brunt of the fall and I fractured my elbow. And so my husband can only take an extra week off of work. So after that, I was still on maternity leave. So I was home with a 9-week-old and a fractured elbow. And so every time I picked her up, it hurt. And every time I tried to feed her, it hurt. So I started to associate my baby with pain, and I wound up spiraling into postpartum depression really badly. And so I went to a doctor and they prescribed me an antidepressant that ruined my life. for multiple years. And I've written about that now. And so when I asked you that question, is because in my head, I think, wow, what a terrible experience that was. But now I'm in this position where I can spread awareness about this antidepressant. And I've stopped so many people from taking it. And I'm not anti-antidepressant. I'm anti-misinformation, because if I had been given any sort of real indication of the side effects or things that happen because of this drug, I may have chosen a totally different drug, right? But doctors are prescribing this stuff out like candy and not telling people, like, there's a chance that you might want to kill yourself while you're starting it or stopping it, or you have to go off really gradually, but the last gradual drop is 20 milligrams, and a lot of people can't handle that. Like, once I started to do the research after I was sort of on the other side of it, I was so angry at how failed I felt by the medical system. And I think until you wind up going through something so traumatic, you don't realize how bad the system actually is and how much you have to advocate for yourself, because your doctors may prescribe you something and they have no idea what they're prescribing you. They're just going based off of what the pharmaceutical company tells them in a pamphlet. So I totally hear you there. But again, I'm grateful it happened to me, because if it didn't happen to me, then I wouldn't have been able to help all these other people and say, like, this is my story. These are other people's stories. This is the actual mechanism of the medication that you're taking from like a science perspective. Make your own call.
Yeah. Be informed.
Be informed.
Yeah.
This is a good conversation. We did the gamut. How the hell you're gonna edit this?
I was like, I've been trying as we're going through. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure exactly what the story is, but we'll figure it out. I'll find the story in all this.
Yeah, it felt like you're just like looking for inspirational stories.
Yep, we'll get there. Like, that's one of the things that I find is that I get into, like, the discussions are so much fun, and the story comes out, like, it's always kind of I go back and I listen back through it. I'm like, there's our common theme.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything else I can answer for you? And
not that I can think of.
We can go on for 3. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, though. I found this really illuminating.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Where do you live?
North Potomac.
Okay, so let's grab lunch. Let's talk in person. I think I like your vibe a lot.
I do too. I love your vibe. Well, and that's the thing that I find is that people that function on a high, like, I'm gonna get woo woo, but people that function on a high energy level, you connect and you can feel the fact that, like, yeah, we're out here doing something bigger than just ourselves.
100%. And people don't like that shit.
No,
they're like, stop it. Oh, should I say where people can find me?
Yes. Do that.
Okay.
Do that. Okay, that right there is your click.
Okay. If you want to know more about me and Sixx Cool Moms, you can find this at sixxcoolmoms.com with 2 X's. You can find me on Instagram at Jenna Levine Liu and on Facebook at Jenna Levine Liu, and Sixx Cool Moms, SIXX Cool Moms, on both Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome.